A week ago today, the Nets took down the Nuggets on the road in Denver, a place the Nuggets have beaten basically everyone this season. So now the Nuggets come to Brooklyn. It's going to be no problem for the Nets, right? Be able to handle business easily. Take them down again. Think again, my friends. The Nuggets came to play. The Nets stumbled again. We're going to break down this game, the Nets' recent swoon, what it means for the rest of the season, and what we can look forward to going forward from here. We'll talk about all of that. But first, the theme music.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome back to the Locked On Nets podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. Letting you know this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com. Promo code Locked On. I am Doug Norrie, one half of the hosts of Locked On Nets. No Adam Armbrecht in the house as he spends the day doing some revelry, I think, in honor of St. Patrick's Day or whatever else is going on this weekend. That's all right. We're locking it down here on a Sunday podcast, talking about the Nuggets and Nets game that just concluded, another Sunday afternoon affair. Always nice to get the hoops in on a Sunday afternoon. Man, loss for the Nets here. We'll talk about the game. You don't mind sitting on the couch, grabbing a game even in those daylight hours. Nice little change of pace from a basketball perspective, especially on a weekend too, where there's just, a million tons of hoops going on across the NCAA, obviously NBA rolling toward the playoffs as well. And you go into this game for the Nets a week after, like I said at the top, a week after the Nets kind of shocked Denver on the road in the Mile High Air, where the Nuggets had been one of the very best, not even one of the very best team at home this season. They're 30-6 at home, and the Nets went in there and kind of took care of business. And we were riding high off the win from that game, doing podcasts like, how high can the Nets climb in the East? Can the Nets hit the 4 seed? Is this where the team is ultimately going? They're, obviously the overtime win against Minnesota and then the win against Denver has you in the Mile High Air, riding a mile high in terms of your emotions around the team. And it doesn't take much sometimes in the grand scope of the NBA to come crashing down to earth, leaving Denver and not winning a game since. They lost the game against OKC. They lost the game at home against Sacramento. And now they lose their third straight against the Nuggets here in Brooklyn in a game where the final score shows you that it's 108-102. I don't think anyone watching the game would ever think that the game was this close. I know the game ends up being a 6-point game because Brooklyn storms back in the fourth quarter, outscoring the Nuggets 31-17 in that frame on the back of a, quasi bench, raise the white flag unit, essentially, that's happening there. They pull within, they give it a shouting's chance. But look, are we really thinking, if you watch this whole game, are you saying to yourself, oh man, that was a close loss, a 6-point loss? We could have pulled that one out. Nets fought hard all the way to the end. No, that's not what was going on here. This game was, by all intents and purposes, a complete blowout where the Nets rode, I would say, a little streaky shooting near the end and probably a little foot off the gas nature of how Denver was playing late in the game to kind of creep the final score back in, away from it being an embarrassing loss and just a loss, right? Because yes, 6 points when we all count up the final tally in the end of the season. If you were watching this game, they're not saying to yourself, ooh, the Nets just missed one there. Or, ooh, that was a hard fought game where that could have gone either way. This game wasn't going either way. This game was going all the Nuggets way, basically from the very start. Now, some of that's a little bit of run bad that the Nets have experienced of late. Some of that is, just, it's not all just being completely over dominated by a very, very good team for sure. But there were very few points in this game where you or us, all of us here as Nets fans, were looking at this game and saying to ourselves, we got this. 5 more minutes and we're back in this. No, it was, this is brutal. The Nuggets are rolling over them. The Nuggets look like a team that is essentially a 1 seed in the West, which they are. And the Nets are very much looking like a 6 seed or maybe worse in the Eastern Conference, which is what they essentially are. And sometimes basketball has a way of evening this stuff out for you. This basketball has a way of sort of bringing out the truth in the end. You give enough minutes and enough of a sample size on a basketball court over the course of a season, sometimes even in a game, and you're going to get the truth of the matter about where these two teams actually stand. And so while a week ago today, the team is leaving Denver and we're thinking to ourselves, oh man, this team really, are they going to win the championship? No, of course not. Could they really surprise some people? Sure. They just surprised Denver as one of the best home teams that we've seen in quite some time, is what the Nuggets record reflects at home. And then it doesn't take much to kind of regress to your own personal or team mean. And this is where the Nets find themselves. And I will say this game against Denver today on this Sunday, March 19th, looks a lot closer to what the probable reality is around these teams. That these are where these teams actually are. Denver is actually a 1 seed. Are they maybe a weaker 1 seed that we've seen in the past? You can make that case, I think. I don't think they're like some kind of dominating team, even with a 48-24 record. So I don't think that we're too, I don't think we're not looking at like, peak Warriors or something like that, peak Bulls. This is still a number 1 seed in the West. So and there's something to be said for that. And they looked a lot of times in this game like a team that was the number 1 seed in the West. And the Nets look like a team that's basically a 500-ish, maybe a little bit below team since the trade deadline. And that's what they kind of looked like today. And sometimes that's just the basketball reality of the situation. Sometimes it can make it harder to be a fan. Sometimes when you're a fan of this kind of team and they pull off that crazy cool win in Denver, it feels even that much better because you sometimes don't expect to be there. And then when you get to the place where you actually are, like is what we saw today, it could feel somewhat deflating. And yeah, did the Nets leave some stuff on the table? Most definitely. We're going to talk about that here shortly. Could this game have been closer in sort of a different iteration of what was happening here? Definitely. The Nets definitely left, saying definitely a lot, for sure left some stuff on the table here. And I think that's been something of a theme over the last couple of games where I think there's a little run bad in what's happening here. And actually there are a few stats that I think we can take away from these last couple Nets games that paint maybe a somewhat rosier picture of the situation. But what this is a reminder of, and what the game against Sacramento was a reminder of, and even the game against the Thunder was a reminder of, is this is not a peak Nets team. This is a Nets team that has maybe a future superstar on it and a bunch of role players. This is a team that has very little margin for error. This is a team that sort of has to play perfectly in the style that they want to play in order to stay in games and ultimately win games against really good teams. That's just the nature of the situation. And that's definitely what we've seen over the last few games, and specifically the last 2 against the Kings and the Nuggets. Want to talk about a couple of things that maybe didn't go the Nets' way in this one. Some things that kind of are just hallmarks of what the team is right now and what we should expect for this team to be maybe going through the rest of the season. Want to get into that in a second. First, I'll tell you about our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Look, maybe you've been on some of these other daily fantasy operators in the past. You're trying to work around salaries. You're trying to just kind of go up against a bunch of sharks in the water. Not on Prize Picks. You're making entries. You're going more or less on the player projections that Prize Picks puts up there. And that's it. It's really, really easy. You pick 2 to 6 players. You figure out if they're going to score more or less than their Prize Picks projection. You can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. You're not competing against other people. It's just you versus those projections. It's that simple. They got the NBA while we roll through the season. MLB right around the corner. Opening day just a few weeks away. NHL storming through it. College basketball, obviously in the middle of the big tournament now. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. Super easy, safe, and fast withdrawals. Currently operational in over 30 states and in Canada. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up to play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign-up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. All right. I know teams, when you watch a team a lot, and when you watch basically every minute a team plays, and I know you out there are saying this to yourself, you watch tons of Nets games. You love the Nets. You follow the Nets. You want to watch how they do. You're going to cheer for who's wearing the uniform. That's what we sign up for. So we're going to sometimes have too close of a look at a team. It's going to make you feel like certain things are happening around your team that you're going to tell yourself a story about the team that you think is not happening to other teams. And when the reality is, like, stuff happens to all squads all the time, right? An example of this would be people that say the refs are always out to get us. Here's a little newsflash. Every team every team's fan base thinks the ref is out to get them. So it's rarely the case, maybe a few examples of it, but probably not. I'm setting this up because I do believe that have the Nets missed a lot of threes over the last couple of games that look like they were completely in. And I'm having a little trouble discerning whether this is my eye wanting to believe something that is the case or whether it's actually the reality. Okay. So this is, again, what happens when you watch a team a lot. We watch a lot of hoops. We watch other teams besides just the Nets. So you get a lay of the land for how this happens. But it does seem to have been extra stark over these last few games where the Nets have actually generated, I would say a lot of good looks from beyond the arc that just haven't gone down. And some of them just are so close. I mean, just really in and out sort of shots that feel like they're all the way down, where even the shooters feel like they're all the way down and they just go down. This is not the only example, but it exemplified a situation in today's game against the Nuggets that felt like the Nets were on maybe something like a heater that was going to get them back into the game, and where they ultimately fell short. And it was the Seth Curry above the break three that he hit off the dribble, that he took off the dribble, and he was kind of running back as if he thought it was good. Now, look, these shooters know, and they can feel it off their hands, and they often sort of have a sense of what's going to happen. Curry's one of the very best three-point shooters, really, honestly, we've ever seen. He's like an incredible three-point shooter, whatever you want to say about the rest of his game. This was a situation where he took that shot, it rimmed out, and then the game is basically over after that. And I thought to myself, man, that really exemplifies a situation that does feel like it's been sticking like in the side of the Nets over these last couple games, which is that the three-point shots just aren't going to go down. This is a team that's built on spacing because they just don't have a fantastic dynamic guard play. They don't have tons of on-ball creators. We talk about this many times. They do have shooters. They do have guys who can space the floor. They have a bunch of sort of 3-and-D guys, and maybe a few guys are a little bit more than that, and a few guys are a little bit less than that. But a lot of players on this team fall into this, like, sort of, that description of a player, 3-and-D sort of kind of guys like that are wings. So they're going to take a lot of threes. I think in general, that is the correct strategy for this team. This team should be bombing threes because that's what most of their guys can do at a well above average level. Because they don't have tons of on-ball creation, they don't want to take a ton of mid-range shots. Like, that's just not really where their bread's going to be buttered. They don't have a fantastic, offensive presence in terms of just creating their own shot. Claxton's been amazing, 9 for 12 in this game. No one looks at him and says, there's a really creative offensive big. That's just not how he's made. So when this team is set up the way they are, yeah, they're going to take a lot of threes. And as we've heard many, many times, and we know it's a make or miss league. And if your threes aren't going to go down, you're going to struggle. Any team is going to struggle. The Nets feel particularly like a team that is going to struggle when the threes don't fall. And when the threes are basically wide open a lot of the time, and they look like they're all the way down and don't go in, then it hurts. There's a little extra hurt on that. And I do feel like that's been the case over at least these last two games, which has felt like great looks, great spacing, pretty good ball movement, penetration kick into Claxton on the short roll kick, multiple motion in the lane, getting into the lane where they're not actually going to look for a shot, but just enough to collapse the defense. We've seen that from a few guys over the course of these last couple, and the shots just don't go down. The other night against the Kings, the Nets shot 36% from three, hit a few of them late, but ultimately 36% for this team is not going to cut it. 34% in this game, believe me, it was much worse. Like, they hit a bunch of these threes late that kind of clawed them back into it. They were 24% at halftime. 25% at halftime from three when the Nuggets had shot 54%. And that stands in pretty stark juxtaposition to what the Nets were doing, because the Nuggets were knocking down their threes. The Nuggets ended up shooting 52% from the field, also a ton of open looks, but they were able to knock those shots down. And do I want to say that's like the whole story of the game? It's not. There's clearly other things going on in this game, but sometimes when you boil down the overall attempts and say, hey, the shots just aren't going down, and it's just going to be tough to win if we just, for a team like the Nets to not make these. Yeah, might end up being the story. And when those attempts look, these aren't end of the shot clock heaves. Okay. These aren't just off the dribble sidestep threes with a hand in your face. These aren't, just, heat check kind of pull up over the wrong defender threes. No, these are like good looks. Cam Johnson had a ton of good looks in this game. Mikal had some good looks in this game. Joe Harris had a good look in this game. Like, these guys had pretty pure looks at like what was happening. Even Royce had a few that were you're fine taking, and they just don't go down. And if that's going to be the case, it can actually end up looking a little worse on paper than might be the reality. Now, again, the Nets are built the way they're built. The names I mentioned are not really superstars. Like, I get it. This is what you can fall victim to sometimes by being a team in the middle. But if those shots, if they're doing the job of actually getting good looks at from 3-point land, and they're actually not doing a good job of converting them, then these are the scenarios, or these are the outcomes that we're going to end up seeing with this team. There's just no way around it. And when I say the team has very little margin for error, this is what I mean. They cannot miss these shots. If they don't have a bailout mode here. They don't have a Kevin Durant that can bail you out of possessions. They don't have a Kyrie Irving who can go into takeover mode and just start getting to the basket, drawing tons of fouls, getting to the line, shooting mid-range over bigger defenders. Like, the Nets don't have those kind of guys. They don't have that break glass in case of emergency. They don't have that superstar level. So when you don't have those guys, you just have to hit these shots. There's no other way around it. You have to hit the threes. If you're not going to do it, you're going to lose. You're going to lose these games. Like, they just don't have that other piece. They don't have that extra gear. They don't have that next guy that can just kind of take something over and be more than maybe the sum of the parts. The Nets are their sum of the parts. And in some ways, they're like more than the sum of their own parts, because they've stuck in a lot of games where they didn't have the best player, or sometimes the best two players in a game, because of the way that these teams are constructed. Like, it's sometimes a testament to say, hey, it's amazing that they're in these games. Remember, they just beat Denver, who Murray got hurt in that game, but they had Jokic, they had Murray. Like, they have nowhere close to the best player in the game, the Nets. When Murray's on the court, they don't probably have the best two players. Depends where you put Murray and Bridges, I suppose. But like, there's a huge talent drop off for some of these teams. So with the Nets, in that case, are kind of hanging in the game because they're just able to sort of cobble together a little bit more than they are talent-wise. But if you're not going to hit the threes, you're going to go 12 for 41 against the Kings. What did they end up shooting here? They 12 for 35 here against the Nuggets. It's just going to be tough. It's just going to be tough. They took way more attempts. They 35 to 23 in terms of threes, and that they took over Denver. Again, correct percentage. That's basically what you want to see. Ball so many times, in and out, in and out, in and out. You could hear it on the broadcast. And it's not even me just saying it. You can hear them on the broadcast saying it too, with Ruocco and Jefferson. Like, these shots look like they're halfway down and they don't go in. Sometimes that's the story of the game. Got some more to talk about here about what's to come here for Brooklyn, where they stand in the standings, what our expectations should be going forward around this team. And if there are other takeaways to kind of put together from what happened here against Denver, we will get to all of that in a second. But first, got to break down the Nissan's most electric player of the week. It's brought to you by the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya. Look, it's been a rough week in Nets land. I get it. They've struggled here against some of these teams. You can say to yourself, do we have a player of the week? Yeah, of course they do. Of course, we always have a player of the week. Frankly, he's been one of the best players for the Nets this whole season. We're given to one Mr. Nick Claxton here again, 14-14 against the Kings. And this one had to deal with Jokic all game. Still went 19 points, 8 rebounds, finishing around the rim, 9 for 12 from the field. -9, we don't care. He still looked good going up against one of, if not the best player in the league right now in Nikola Jokic. That's why we are going with one Mr. Nick Claxton. He's been looking electric at times. Fierce, fiercely elegant, stunningly powerful, elegantly powerful. Just some of the words that come up when you think about the 2023 Nissan Ariya. Packs pin to your seat power and premium intelligence all in one EV. The all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya, the EV for people who love to drive. Shop now at nissanusa.com. And the Built March Madness bracket is here. We know you have a favorite Built bar or puff. It's now your time to make it count. You go to builtmarchmadness.com to vote for your favorites. So many teams, and I mean bars, to vote for here. Peanut butter, brownie, coconut, salted caramel, cookies and cream, double chocolate. That's just some of the variety that you're going to get from our friends over at Built Bar. When you vote for your favorite Built bar or puff, you'll be entered into a drawing where 50 lucky Locked On listeners are going to get a free box of Built. That's a free box of Built, folks, just for entering. Not only that, but one Locked On fan will win a 12-month subscription to Built to have Built bars or puffs delivered monthly straight to your door. You got to try Built. Built, the best protein bar ever. They're seriously amazing. I read you the flavors there a minute ago. Not candy bars, folks. Actual protein bars that are actually good for you. Go to builtmarchmadness.com right now to vote for your favorite bar or puff and pick up a box while you're there. You can vote every day in March, so hop in and support your pick. builtmarchmadness.com. All right, let's close this thing out with a little lay of the land where the Nets are concerned. Obviously, the situation is looking a little worse after this past week than it looked going into the week. That's what happens when you lose 3 straight games. Right now, Brooklyn's sitting at 39-32. They are in the 6th seed. They are a game and a half in the loss column up over the Heat. Miami does play on Sunday. I'm just checking right now. I think they were in the middle of playing. They're losing to Detroit as we speak. So we'll know how that game ends, but still in the first quarter. So a lot of game left in that one. And then there's a drop off to the Hawks, who the Nets are 4 games in the loss column up on the Hawks. And I think that's looking probably pretty safe, especially when you look at sort of where the Nets are going to end up being, because they don't have a ton of more difficult games left in the schedule. It does get a little bit easier for the Nets over the final, 12 to 13 games of the season. But the Heat are looming large here. It's very annoying because the Heat have a negative point differential on the season, even though they're 4 games over 500. Some people have called them the zombie Heat because they've won a ton of close games late. Hey, look, you want to call it luck, you want to call it good coaching, the right kind of talent on the team. They've had an impossible time scoring this season, the Heat have, but the W's are W's, and the wins are the wins and the losses are the losses. Miami 25th in offensive efficiency this season. Only teams worse than Miami in offense this season: Orlando, Detroit, San Antonio, Charlotte, Houston. What do you know about those teams? They're all the worst teams in the league. Then right above them is Miami, who is now on the nipping at the Nets' heels when it comes to the playing game. So somewhat of an annoying situation, but it's hard to complain too much. The Nets are also a team that were built on a huge number of wins that they had put together, in the KD and Kyrie era. And this is just a team that's different. So obviously the situation for the Nets is different than the beginning of the season. So can complaints be had around this? I suppose, though not really, because that's just sort of the way the situation breaks out for these teams. Obviously, the Nets probably aren't as good as the record that they have would suggest, but it's a situation where, they are where they are, and they're still battling it out for the 6th seed, for the 5th seed when it's all said and done, to be able to avoid the playing game. And that's just where the Nets are right now. And do we want them to avoid the playing game? Yeah, because I think if there's a play-in scenario, the Nets probably are still pretty undermanned when it comes to having to make it out of that situation. You still got to win one. You might have, you have to win 1 out of 2 if they land in the 6th seed. So they still have really pretty good odds. According to 538's model, they have 94% chance to make the playoffs right now. And that, that's just where it stands right now. This stuff can move up and down as games are played. So it never is set in stone, but the Raptor model has been a pretty accurate model for predicting some of this stuff in the past, and it reflects where the Nets are in the standings, reflects where the other teams are around them. So you still have to feel pretty good about the scenario, but losing 3 games in a row does put that a little bit dicey. So the rest of the situation for the Nets in terms of their overall schedule. They have a couple games here. They have the 2 Cleveland games back to back. They play Tuesday against Cleveland, and then they play Thursday against Cleveland, both at home. So they get the home and home going here against Cleveland. Those games will be, they don't look as important now as they maybe looked a week ago when we were kind of staring at Cleveland with possibly a shot at the 4 seed. Now they're 5 games back in the loss column. 4 games back in the loss column from Cleveland. That's pretty much a pipe dream at this point. I don't think they can leapfrog that into the 4 seed at this point. They just, the recent swoon has done away with that. Still be nice to win these games because you want to distance yourself from Miami, who they play next Saturday. That probably right now is one of the biggest games of the season. I don't want to say that's going to like fully predict what's going to happen here for the rest of the time, but being able to distance themselves from Miami in that game will be pretty important for kind of finalizing the seed. Again, most important game of the year. Can lots of stuff happen? For sure. The season's still long, and that's just the way the situation goes. But it's going to be worth kind of just checking into for the next 3 games, 2 against Cleveland and the 1 against Miami, trying to checking in after those 3 games to see where they are, because I think that is going to end up being the situation the Nets kind of are going to know how the rest of it's going to unfold, because after that it's Orlando and Houston, Atlanta for a game, Utah, which is probably going to be out of it at that point, not wanting to. Well, I mean, they're in 10th right now. Maybe not. Maybe Utah is still fighting. Then they have Minnesota, who is also in the playing game. Maybe you think that's going to be a tough one. Detroit, Orlando, and then Philly. We'll see where Philly is feeling about seeding in that final game of the season. So it does get a little easier after those next 3 games. And we'll see where the Nets are going to land. But ultimately, it's tough because you would have liked to see them take one of these past 3 games against OKC, Sacramento, or Denver. Again, Sacramento, really good team this year. Denver, really good team this year. It's hard to fault the Nets too much for losing to those teams. Those are like the 1 and 2 seeds in the Western Conference right now. So, I mean, can we go crazy for losing against those ones? No. Is it just close enough against some of those teams where you feel like they could have and should have pulled it off? For sure. A few of those aforementioned 3-pointers go down. Maybe we're talking singing a little bit of a different tune around the Nets. All right. Going to get out of here. Really appreciate everyone that's jumped into YouTube. We'll stick around for a few minutes to answer some YouTube questions, as always, as we roll through the YouTube live. In the meantime, make sure you subscribe over YouTube, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure you support those sponsors too. PrizePicks, Built Bar, Nissan. Those are the places that keep the podcast firing. So make sure you do that. Really appreciate everyone that's jumped in, even after a Nets loss. Adam is the one who always comes in with the quotes here at the very end. Not going to be able to do that this time because my man is out there enjoying the day. We're going to hold it down here. And just know that one Mr. Adam Armbrecht, one of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball. All right, the podcast will roll through. I got a lighting issue going on here, as you can see on the old YouTube. Just got a little light shining in from an unknown it's not unknown. It's just a not often known source, which is throwing off the video here a little bit. I'm going to queue up a few of these questions, which I see people have thrown into. I've not really screened these questions too much, so hopefully everyone has kept it on the PG or at worst PG-13 side of things. Because when you're rolling through the solo style, you can't really, it's hard to read and talk at the same time, folks. You wouldn't think that all the time. Reading and talking sometimes don't mix. All right. What do you think about running our offense through Mikal Bridges? We did it tonight and it didn't work. So I think the Nets offense is predicated on a couple of different things. It's on a little bit of motion, finding the right mismatch that they can try to get sometimes Bridges or most of the time Dinwiddie also into. And that's kind of like the offense, and then space and pace everybody else around those 2 actions, and hope that you either catch Claxton in the short roll, you catch one like a Dinwiddie on a penetration and kick. And that's sort of like what they end up kind of wanting to run. 18 shots for Bridges, 11 assists for Dinwiddie. I mean, like that's kind of where they landed. I think 18 to 20 shots for Bridges is pretty much correct. I mean, 18 shots in 31 minutes is fine, I think, for him. I don't mind like sort of a development cycle on him that puts him sort of into that usage range. If anything, the 6 shots from Dinwiddie were like really low compared to what he's been doing in the offense lately. I actually don't have like huge problems with the offensive scheme and sets the Nets are running. I think it is generating good looks. They're just not, like I said in the podcast, they're just not going down. Like at some point, like that's just kind of tells the whole story. I think for the personnel the Nets have, like this is where they should be running their offense through. And if the 3-pointers just aren't going to go down off good looks, like what can you do? I hate to be that defeatist, or maybe I'm being too apologetic for the Nets around that stuff, but that to me does feel like the story. So I don't mind running the offense that they've been running. I actually don't have huge problems with it. And I think, running these sort of pistol actions that they have where they have the wing come up, or running sort of, mid pick and roll with Claxton to try and get him, at the nail, and then have him decide and make a read, or sometimes put it on the deck and get to the rim. I think that's kind of fine. And I'm fine with most of the shots that Bridges has taken. He's shown that he can shoot it in the mid range too. So I think I'm pretty much fine all around. What are your thoughts on JV's coaching today in recent games? Seems like an essential talking point. So we talked about this a bunch last time. My only qualm with the coaching, sort of, and I guess it changed a little bit today, but it was mostly because it was a blowout, is I still just think that the rotations are like a little weird, like just how few bench minutes some of these other guys get. Like I just would be playing some of these guys a little bit more. Like I'd be playing Edmund Sumner a little bit more. I mean, Cam Thomas got run, but that was kind of in the blowout. I don't know. I'd play Yuta a little bit more. I just think the Nets are deep enough to actually have the rotations be a little bit longer, or excuse me, have the bench rotations go a little bit longer, that they just don't seem to want to do. Again, I think schematically, I think it's been pretty good. I mean, one thing that I actually meant to mention on the podcast, and I didn't, and I forgot, and I realized I kind of blew it because it was in my notes, is that what's sort of underrated is that the Nets did just take the two. Yeah, right. So the Nets over the last 3 games have played the number 1 offense and the number 3 offense in the league in Sacramento and Denver, and held them to 101 points and 108 points. Like that's awesome. Like the offensive efficiency on Sacramento is 117. The offensive efficiency on Denver is 115.7. I'll probably end up talking more about this on the podcast tomorrow. The unfortunate part of losses is it kind of makes you forget that like the defense has actually been good. Like the Denver put up 108 points. This team scores a ton. This team's like all offense with Jokic and Murray and Porter and these guys. And Sacramento's got like a historically great offense right now with that 117 offensive efficiency. So I think that I screwed up a little bit by not talking about that more on the podcast because I meant to. So, and that falls on coaching. Like schematically, I think for the most part, they've had a pretty good idea of how they want to deal with some of these bigger guys where they know they're outmanned. So I got to give Vaughn a little bit of credit for that. And again, I feel the shots have been looked okay. Like, I don't know. What are you going to do? It's like hard to go totally nuts about some of that stuff. And I know it's really tough after you lose 3 games straight. Sorry, I'm going to jump this one. Do you think Vaughn's overusage of a lot of guys whose minutes jump considerably has come back to bite the Nets? Even Claxton looks gassed. Yeah, I guess I kind of answered this a second ago, but for sure, like I don't think that these minutes rotations are. I just dropped my pen. I just don't think these minutes rotations are totally correct. I would be playing. I would just be playing some of these bench guys a little bit more. That's just the way it is. I would be playing. I'd be playing just Yuta more. I'd be playing Sumner more. Just kind of see what we have here. If you lose the games, you lose the games. I just don't know why exactly they're doing this thing. All right, I'm going to do a couple more here. This light thing's driving me nuts. If DFS, Dorian Finney-Smith or a wing is struggling, why not put someone else in? A bad DFS night should be subbed out for one of the bench players, in my opinion, because his role should be replaceable. So this actually, to some degree, it's funny because I think Dorian Finney-Smith still, like defensively, is pretty important for what the Nets are going to do. Obviously, it's always going to look bad, and his struggles are going to look real when the shot is not going down. That's kind of always going to be the problem for him in terms of just like what his overall game is. So I'm trying to block this. I got the sun shining in here from the side. Just what his overall game is. So I think that in general, like I don't fault that. Like I actually don't mind. I know he was a -20 in this game, but I don't have a huge problem with it because I do think like at times they need his size. Like he is playing small ball 5 at times, which I think he's been pretty good at. So in general, I don't have a huge problem with it, but I can understand why it looks bad on offense, but we knew that was going to be the case with him on offense. Like, he's just not a good offensive player. What do you think about Cam Thomas now? Yeah, well, it's hard to be behind him. He's looked not very good, and they kind of jack around his minutes a lot. Yeah, I mean, can you be behind him right now? They haven't done him any favors when it comes to this stuff, and I just don't know like what the situation, how it gets any better for him if it seems like they're just not really into what he's doing. So, yeah, I mean, how are you hiring him? We've been kind of somewhat head scratching around where the Cam situation is when it comes to Vaughn. I don't totally get it. He played 22 minutes in this game, but most of it was just garbage time bench run. He's still coming in those early rotations. He looked terrible in his first rotation again. I mean, defensively missed like 3 assignments. But it's hard to get a lot better at that end when you don't really play that much. So I don't really know what the situation is here. Is it time to play the bench more? Consider looking at the lottery. I still think they banked too many wins to really do this. So I would not do this. At this point, I would just stay the course, try to win these games, try to keep it, try to stick in the 5th seed, and just try to be a little bit exciting in the playoffs. But that's my opinion. They just banked too many wins. You just have to, at this point, it's just too late to try to tank. And I don't think the marginal gains on the pick would be good enough to actually make that worth it. So that's just not something that I want to do. So I saw that question a couple of times. Saw someone that said I skipped the question, but sorry, I don't see what the question is. Again, when you're rolling, oh, here we go. By the way, if you have a question, put in at Locked On Nets or at Doug or something like that. Just put at the front of it because that helps my eyes. Sorry. Okay, let's find the question. Just put at the front of it because that's how my head and my brain is able to read these. Okay, this light from the side has bothered me. I'm going to figure this out for next time. The daytime podcast is what screw us up here in the office a little bit, which I'm realizing. There we go. I blocked it a little bit with my hat. Haven't done the daylight savings time plus a Nets Sunday afternoon game in the old office. Haven't had to do too many daytime podcasts. I realized. Gonna have to figure out the old the lighting situation for this one, and probably will never rear its ugly head again because the Nets always play at night, and that's just the way it is. Okay, really appreciate everyone jumping in here for YouTube. Appreciate all the questions, and I really appreciate everyone that's just especially the folks that are just in here, Be With and Habla, and just really like everybody. Ivan, who's been in here a million times, and J-Man J, just trying to roll through some of the names of people that I know are just in here all the time, always listening. Really, really appreciate it. Even the trolling questions. Brendan, I know you've been in here a bunch. Really appreciate that. Even the trolling questions, we can deal with it every once in a while. No problem. Do a little trolling myself. Okay, gonna get out of here. We'll be back again. Adam and I will talk a little bit about the defensive stuff. We'll talk about the Nets projections going forward. We'll do all that tomorrow. See everyone later. Be back tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.